Damaged Defenders by Sherzeb. Chapter 138. Darcy. Darcy decided she really liked Pal Thor. Hanging out with him a while at the X-Men, it became real obvious that Thor had inherited the bulk of his mother's Vanaheim blood when it came to personality and temperament. Which, thank goodness for that. It looked like the only thing Thor had inherited from Odin was a shorter fuse on his temper, with the arrogance and all that nonsense being tacked on veneers thanks to how he'd been raised, that he was shedding with the quickness now. If he turned out anything like his uncle when he was older, Asgard wasn't going to have a thing to worry about when it came to Thor being on the throne. On top of just being a really easygoing, laid-back person, Balthor played no favorites with his nephews. It was clear to Darcy this wasn't a new thing either, because Loki made it plain he enjoyed Balthor's company, mostly by way of a complete lack of dirty looks and vicious snark, but it was still telling given how displeased Loki was with the older members of his adopted family most days. His beef with Thor was on a completely different level and for entirely different reasons. Thank all that was holy, Thor was doing everything he could think of, including asking for advice at regular intervals, to patch the damage done to his relationship with Loki. Darcy was pretty darn sure the two brothers would come out the other side of this with their relationship in much better shape than it had ever been. Now, though, now was the time to get really worried, because they were on the ground in Canada, Alpha Flight mixing in with the Avengers and chatting amiably. Well, most of them were chatting. Darcy was pretty sure that the leader, the Bieber dude, and Remy were flirting with each other while they waited for the Jotun contingent to arrive. This was not going to end well. Pretty much all the Avengers knew it too, but Darcy had a better idea than most. She knew how little Loki had been sleeping thanks to her mostly self-appointed job as cat herder. As in, he hadn't slept at all save for 2 nights since the invasion. All other concerns aside, being that sleep-deprived was going to mess with a person's ability to think clearly, given the utterly messed up situation at hand. Yeah, Darcy was fully expecting bloodshed before the day was done. Loki was wound so tight right now, Darcy was wondering how he wasn't literally, physically shattering. And the reason she knew he was wound that tight was that she was leaning virtually all her weight on him. She had exactly 0 illusions on being able to stop Loki from lashing out physically or magically, but hopefully having to take her presence into account would slow him down a second or two, thus giving the Jotuns a chance to GTFO before Loki lost it. It was encouraging to Darcy that Loki tolerated her leaning on him like that. He wasn't anywhere near stupid, so he had to know why she was doing it, especially given she'd never done this sort of thing before. He was also tolerating her somewhat unusual nattering. She had started talking about random things pretty much the instant they'd landed, hoping to distract Loki. It was really all she could do, and he was letting her do it, which told her that messed up he might be, but Loki was not fully on board with losing it. Thor was keeping a sharp eye out too, but he was staying near the jets. Unfortunately, his history with the Jotuns was not going to help the situation at all. It was, in point of fact, highly likely to cause just as much of a problem all on its own as Loki's displeasure. Displeasure! That was one heck of a way to put it, but yeah, Darcy wasn't quite sure what else to call it. Then, on the far side of the clearing, the air warped. Darcy had noticed that happening once or twice. It seemed to be limited to either when more than 1 or 2 people were teleporting in, or if said people were, for instance, wearing dark clothes and teleporting into somewhere with a lot of white or pastel colors, or vice versa. So, I was thinking, once we get back to the city after this Dog and Pony show, we need to hit the Strand again, because you didn't even get to see like half that place, Darcy said as something like 20 Vanir and another 20 Jotuns appeared. Loki went from wound tight to... Darcy wasn't even sure what, but it could not be good news. She leveled a flat, go away look at everyone. Hopefully the Jotuns would buy a clue and steer clear. Who was she kidding? This could only end in tears. Blood and tears. It took Loki a minute to answer, though whether that was because he was that upset, or it took him a minute to decide if he was going to humor her, Darcy didn't know. That sounds like a pleasant proposition, he said eventually. Yeah, not good. His voice was every bit as strung-tight as he was. He was practically biting out every word. Damn Odin to the deepest hell that had ever existed. Darcy really wanted to go find him and kick his butt. Loki was about to come unglued just from being within 100 feet of members of his own race. This was... And there was literally nothing she or anyone else could really do to stop it or fix it. Loki had roughly 1,000 years of internalized racism crammed into his head. I figured we'll probably need the nap time, because I tell you what, Loki, I know the elves are drama queens and you've probably dealt with them a lot, but they have nothing on some humans. We are in for some seriously interesting times, and not just with this tour, though the tour will let you see some of the Wakanu in person. I fully expect at least one nutball to actually literally worship at your or Thor's feet before all is said and done. And don't get me started on what folks will do in regards to the whole aliens are real thing. That is just... Darcy snorted, unwillingly amused. Yeah, that's going to be both disturbing and hilarious. Loki, much to her delight, made a noise that sounded distinctly amused, if also strained. Visiting the bookstore again would be quite pleasant. Yes, he agreed. As to the amount of drama humans can generate versus what an elf is capable of, we shall have to see. After all, elves have had quite a long time to develop their dramatics. Then his tone changed, and Darcy knew without looking he was smirking. It will be quite entertaining if there's anyone actually worship Thor or myself. Darcy gave an amused snort. Thor would probably... Well, actually, Darcy wasn't all that sure what he'd do. Brush it off? Try to correct the would-be worshippers? She just knew he wouldn't let them keep going. He might have done before he met her and Jane, but not these days. Loki, on the other hand... Yeah, he wasn't the god of mischief, among other titles, for nothing. She absolutely would not put anything past him, especially if he happened to be bored. No traumatizing gullible idiots for life, Darcy decreed, her tone every bit as amused as Loki's had been. Also, she was counting this as a win. There were Jotuns less than 200 feet away, and Loki was, while not unbothered, considerably less upset than he'd started out, at least on the surface, in that he was talking and acting amused and generally indulging her. Darcy wasn't fool enough to think he wasn't messed up 9 ways to Sunday, but he was at least managing to not let it all hang out, for now. While they'd been talking, she'd been watching the Jotuns, and it was, well, interesting. Darcy had only gotten the briefest of glances at Frobody when she'd been at the tower, so this was really Darcy's first chance to get a good long look at them. First off, every last one of them was naked, save for a very short loincloth or kilt type deal. They all also spent about the first 5 minutes with their eyes either closed or very close to it, and even when they opened their eyes, they squinted like hell and or shielded their eyes with a hand. Having heard from Tony about how dim and dark Jotunheim was, that didn't surprise her. Honestly, she was surprised they could see it all in the bright sunshine. They were also all big buggers. Like, all of them topped Thor in size by at least a foot and probably 100 pounds of muscle. They also came in a surprising range of shades of blue, from the sort of nearly white blue that would all but disappear in fresh snow, to the deeper, darker shades that would disappear in shadows. Also, they were either all males, or there were no differing secondary sex characteristics going on, because there weren't any breasts on any of them. Or, given that they were aliens, it could be that something else was going on. Then, predictably, it all went to hell. One of the Jotuns did a thing. Darcy wasn't sure if it was magic or what, but they grew an ice blade over one hand. She didn't think it was an overt act of violence. The Jotun in question didn't look pissed, though given they weren't human, that wasn't saying much of anything. That said, they'd been one of the ones off to one side and not talking much with any of the Avengers, so Darcy didn't think anything had been said to them to set them off. Thor, for his part, was still by the jet, with Mjolnir not even in sight, and trying his best to look as unaggressive as he was capable of, if it was on the jet. So again, she didn't think anything had happened there. Whatever, the Jotun in question wasn't even making any threatening gestures with the ice knife. Given they were on a new planet, possibly for the first time in their life, they'd probably been ensuring they could do that here. Whatever the reason they'd done the thing. Yeah, Loki made a choked noise that kind of defied description, and the next thing Darcy knew, the world went wonky for half a second because Loki teleported. For whatever reason, Darcy ended up going for the ride. For all she hadn't expected it, and for all Loki was now all but literally radiating nearly unhinged rage, Darcy could see shimmers of gold-green magic out of the corner of her eyes, for goodness sake. She was grateful she'd ended up going along for the ride because it gave her the opportunity to try to derail Loki. Darcy then did possibly the stupidest thing she'd ever done. It topped back-talking Odin even, and she knew it. She turned to face Loki, half-climbed the tall bastard, and got eye-to-eye with him, deliberately blocking his view of the Jotun that was now behind her as much as she could. "Hey, Loki, chill, okay? Breathe. Look at me," Darcy demanded, and tried not to piss her pants because holy crap, the look on Loki's face was enough to scare the hell out of anyone with sense. Fangy grin, green eyes lit with his magic, and just generally looking like he was half a second from a bloodbath. "Look at me," Darcy snapped a second time, putting every ounce of boss bitch she possessed into it, trying to stop Loki before he got started. She even went so far as to grab his head and try to physically force him to look at her. For all the good that did! It was like trying to move Mjolnir! And yeah, losing the battle here. She could feel his magic building, kind of like when an electrostatic generator was running, which was ironic, given it was Thor who did the lightning shtick. There was really only one more thing she could try, and it had a 50-50 chance of blowing up in her face. "You do this, Odin wins," she said, this time more quietly than before. "This is what the rat bastard wanted. For you to hate who and what you are, your own people, and..." She couldn't exactly wave a hand, given she was clinging to Loki like a monkey in order to be eye-to-eye with him, so she shrugged. "I mean, I don't know for sure why he did it, but he very obviously wound you up with the intent of aiming you at them for his own ends." And that, finally, got him to look at her rather than at the Jotun somewhere behind her. Mind you, that wasn't all that comforting because now that distinctly unhinged and more than slightly murderous look was focused on her, but at least he wasn't trying to burn a hole in the Jotun with his glare anymore. Step in the right direction. "You're better than this. Better than him," Darcy said now she had Loki's attention. "I get that what you've been through is severely messed up beyond any descriptors we humans have for such things, but god damn it, Loki, you're better than letting yourself be used as a wind-up weapon by some fucked up psychopathic old dude with a god complex, or whatever the fuck is wrong with Odin. I really don't give a shit where he's concerned." And holy crap, it was working, in that Loki was not launching an attack yet, and seemed to be more focused on her and what she was saying than anything else. Heck, even the green and gold sparklies she'd been seeing out of the corner of her eye for the last, 5 minutes, maybe more, were lessening. And then, between one breath and the next, sanity returned, at least in part. At the very least, Loki seemed to finally realize what he'd done and been prepared to do if his expression had been anything to go by, and that such things were, not warranted. Darcy latched on even more firmly. If he responded the way he did the last time he'd calmed down after he lost it, he'd try to run. And no, she wasn't letting him do that. Her movement evidently brought Loki's attention to what she was doing. The look on his face when he realized that she was clinging to him like a baby monkey, and he had instinctively allowed such a thing, was priceless. Better, the air stopped sparking with his magic. "Do you have any sense of self-preservation at all?" he asked. There was a very strained deliberation to his tone, like he was forcing himself to both ignore the Jotuns in their vicinity and to stay calm, but Darcy was going to take it. "What good is that? All the fun happens when you take chances," Darcy said, grinning at him. "I mean, if Jane and I played it safe," she wrinkled her nose. "Yeah, no, that doesn't bear thinking about, because that would be really sad and pathetic and boring." Since he didn't seem like he was going to flee for the horizon, she finally dismounted. "Come on, let's go sit in the jet for a few. I think we could both use a breather." Amusingly, Loki let her drag him off. He was probably grateful to get away from the situation, which accounted for it. Thor, bless him, didn't say a word as they passed him, just gripped Loki's shoulder briefly as they passed, then planted himself in the middle of the ramp, whereupon his body language went from, "I won't hurt anyone honest," to, "You shall not pass!" "Do you really think," Loki started to ask. "It's the only thing that makes a shred of sense," Darcy told him as they sat down. "I mean, seriously, if he'd wanted for you to rule them, he wouldn't have, done the whole Jotuns are evil thing, or let anyone else do it around you, whether you knew you were one or not. Heck if I know why he wanted to wipe them out. I mean, trying to ice Earth? Not nice, but not really a kill them all worthy offense either. Especially given that Odin didn't think humans had any real worth. But he wanted them wiped out. And from everything you and Frigga have said, you're like crazy powerful with magic. Wind you up, let you rip, and the Jotun get wiped out. But his hands are clean, because it totes wasn't him that did it. Loki made a face that was hard to interpret, but that Darcy figured it meant he was contemplating the feasibility of finding Odin and stringing the bastard up by his heels. Now then, Darcy not only wouldn't stop Loki, she'd well cheer him on. Thank you for stopping me, Loki said after a minute. Thank you for letting me, Darcy said, because she was not dumb enough to think otherwise. Loki could so very easily have ignored her and done whatever he wanted. Hell, he probably could have teleported without bringing her with him, which implied all sorts of things, especially in combination with his tolerance of her climbing him and getting in his face. Things she'd have to think about later, because she was realizing, later, she was going to have a lot to think about. End of Damaged Defenders by Sherza. If you enjoyed this recording on the content, feel free to leave a comment below or a review of the original story from the link in the descriptions. Thank you for listening.